Do you remember where you were on July 20th, 1969? Maybe you were sitting cross-legged on the shag carpet, the smell of your mom's meatloaf drifting in from the kitchen. Or maybe you were huddled around a black and white TV with your family squinting at the snowy image as a man from Earth set foot on the moon. It was a moment that seemed to stop time. The world held its breath, and for one fleeting moment, it felt like we were all watching the same dream come true. Welcome, dear friends, to another stroll down memory lane. Today, we're going back to that unforgettable summer of '69, the night the moon seemed just a little bit closer. This was more than a broadcast. It was a moment in history that united the world. Over 600 million people watched live. That's more than the population of the entire United States at the time. In this video, we'll relive the moon landing through the lens of everyday life in the 1960s, the televisions we gathered around the excitement in our neighborhoods, what was happening in the world that led us to that moment, and how it made us feel like anything was possible. I'll be sharing some personal memories along the way, and I'd love for you to do the same. So get comfy, maybe pour yourself a cup of Sanka, and let's remember together. Before we get to July 1969, let's rewind just a bit. Do you remember what life felt like? In the mid to late 60s, gas was around 35 cents a gallon. A loaf of bread, about 20 cents. You could walk into a Woolworths with $5 and come out with a bag full of goodies. And if you had a Zenith or RCA color TV in your living room, you were considered pretty lucky. But underneath the familiar rhythms of daily life, the world was changing fast. The Cold War, the Vietnam War civil rights marches there, was tension, but also hope. We were glued to the headlines. JFK had declared in 1961 that we'd land a man on the moon before the decade was out. And year after year, we watched as NASA's missions Gemini, Mercury, and eventually Apollo brought us closer to the stars. Back then, space travel wasn't just science fiction. It was on cereal boxes, Saturday morning cartoons, and every kid's bedroom wall. Remember Tang, that powdered orange drink astronauts supposedly loved? Suddenly drinking Tang made you feel like part of the mission. TVs were the hearth of the home. Families gathered each night to watch the Ed Sullivan Show, I Dream of Jeannie, or Dragnet. And when something important happened, like a space launch, everyone watched. It was the era of appointment television. And while the world outside might have been uncertain, inside our homes, there was a shared rhythm to life. Neighbors waving from across the street, rotary phones ringing, the smell of fresh-cut grass on a Saturday morning. Where were you living in 1969? A small town, big city, or maybe overseas? Tell us in the comments. We'd love to hear your memories. By the summer of 1969, we were ready for something big, something hopeful, and NASA was about to deliver. Sunday, July 20th, 1969. Do you remember the buzz in the air that evening? The whole day had a different feel to it, as if something big was about to happen. Even the summer heat seemed to pause for a moment. Many of us had never spent so much time in front of the television on a Sunday night. But this wasn't just a show. This was history live. NBC, CBS, ABC, all the networks were covering it. Walter Cronkite, with that calm, steady voice, was our guide. Man on the moon, the newspapers had said. But seeing it live, that was something else. We sat shoulder to shoulder, grandparents, parents, kids packed into living rooms like sardines. Some folks even brought televisions outside onto porches or lawns so neighbors could watch together. Remember that and those images, fuzzy, grainy black and white shapes? You could barely make out Neil Armstrong stepping down the ladder of the Eagle, but we felt it. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. Even now, that line still gives people goosebumps. I remember my dad whispering, "We're watching history," and I didn't fully grasp it at the time. But something in his voice told me this was no ordinary night. Even the commercials that aired felt different. There were spots for General Electric, RCA, and Tang, of course. But everything seemed hushed, reverent, as if the whole world had pulled over to the side of the road to watch the stars. And the moon? The moon felt different that night, too. You remember, you'd step outside and just stare up at it. It looked the same, but knowing someone was actually up there made it almost magical. Church bells rang in some towns. Fireworks went off in others. Some folks cried, some prayed, but all of us felt something together. Did you or your family take any photos that night? Maybe a scrapbook entry or a journal note? If so, we'd love to hear about it in the comments. In a decade filled with division between generations, between races, between nations, the moon landing did something incredible. It united us, even if only for a while. Think about it. America had just come through the assassinations of JFK, Martin Luther King Jr., and Bobby Kennedy. The Vietnam War was raging. Cities had erupted in protest. And yet, on July 20th, we were reminded of what was possible when we worked together. NASA employed over 400,000 people to make the Apollo missions happen. Scientists, engineers, seamstresses, janitors, factory workers. Every single one of them played a role. And it wasn't just the U.S. watching. People all over the globe, Soviet Union, France, India, Japan, gathered around their televisions too. For a brief moment, the moon didn't belong to any one country. It belonged to all of us. Back then, we didn't have the internet or smartphones, no social media. Just a few TV channels and maybe a newspaper the next morning. But that made it more special in a way. The shared experience was stronger. If you missed it, you had to hear about it from someone who saw it. It became part of the oral history of a generation. And the next day, it was all anyone could talk about. At the barbershop, at the AJs&P, at the bus stop. Teachers brought it up in class. People who had never spoken much to their neighbors swapped moon landing stories over fences and folding chairs. Even comic books and cereal boxes had moon landing specials. You could send away for a commemorative patch or buy a moon globe from the back of Boys Life magazine. The excitement lingered for weeks, and in a subtle way, it changed how we saw the world. For the first time, astronauts looked back from space and saw Earth as a small blue marble fragile hole and shared. That iconic image, Earthrise, made us realize maybe we're not so different after all. Do you remember what you did the day after the moon landing? Did your school or community do anything special? Share it with us. The moon landing wasn't just a one-night wonder, it stayed with us. For years afterward, it echoed in our music, our movies, and even the way we looked at the night sky. Remember how every classroom suddenly had a poster of the solar system, or how every kid wanted to be an astronaut dressing up like Neil Armstrong for Halloween toy stores, sold plastic space helmets, little moon rovers, and space food sticks. Even Barbie got her own astronaut outfit in 1965, 4 years before we landed on the moon. And let's not forget the rise of sci-fi. Just a few years later, we got Star Wars in 77. But before that, shows like Lost in Space 2001, A Space Odyssey, and Star Trek had already ignited our imaginations. The moon landing made us believe that the future wasn't just coming, it was already here. Even commercials changed. Companies tied their products to space-age technology. Everything from vacuum cleaners to breakfast cereals claimed to be designed like NASA. And people believed it too, but perhaps the most profound shift was internal. We saw the Earth differently. That blue marble photo taken from the moon made headlines and hearts across the globe. It reminded us that despite all our differences, we were riding on the same rock together. The moon landing gave us a feeling of hope and possibility. In a world that often felt divided and uncertain, here was a shining example of what we could do when we dreamed big, worked hard, and believed in something greater than ourselves. So here we are over 5 decades later, and yet that night, in July of '69, still shines bright in our collective memory. Whether you watched it live in your living room, heard it on the radio, or read about it in the next morning's paper, you felt it. You were there, part of the moment. And while a lot has changed since then, how we get our news, how we talk to one another, even how we watch TV, one thing remains: that deep human longing to reach for the stars. We've come a long way. Technology moves faster now, and younger generations scroll through history with their thumbs. But for those of us who lived it, the moon landing was more than just a news event. It was a memory etched into our hearts. So tell us, what do you remember most from that night? The people you were with, the feeling in the air, the wonder in your heart. Leave a comment below, like, and share this video if it brought a smile to your face, and subscribe for more memory journeys just like this one. Until next time, keep looking up. The stars are still waiting.